The Celestial Educational Facility, Beta 13, always felt more like a mausoleum than a school after curfew. Its walls hummed faintly with the passage of air through vents. Its floors gleamed too perfectly beneath sterile lights, and its corridors stretched long and empty, patrolled by drones whose only loyalty was to dust and order. Ari Malik had learned, in the 3 months since arriving, how to move like the drones did. Quiet, efficient, unremarkable. The official documents named him a cultural operations apprentice, but in practice he was a janitor with a mop and a badge that opened doors no one else cared to enter. He liked it that way. Invisible. Predictable. That night he had just finished scouring the lower lecture hall, polishing away the faint phosphorescent streaks Lesari students left on the seats when their tails brushed against the cushions. When the scent of damp metal and stale protein sludge led him toward the cafeteria reclamation units. They usually hissed and clicked, swallowing uneaten food and turning it into nutrient paste. But as he passed, the faint sound of breathing made him stop. Ari leaned on his mop like a staff and peered around the corner. There, in the shadow of the reclamation chute, sat a small figure. The alien boy's uniform was pristine, pressed sharper than most cadets, but his tray was empty. His body language betrayed what his face tried to hide. Lysari ears folded down flat against his skull like drooping sails, signaling exhaustion and hunger. The kid looked up when Ari's footsteps echoed. His eyes were a strange amber green, luminescent in the cafeteria's dim light. He said nothing, but his throat worked as though he wanted to speak and had chosen silence instead. "Hey," Ari said softly, not wanting to spook him. "You okay?" No answer. Just the faintest twitch of those folded ear fins. Ari glanced at the reclamation units, then at the boy's bare tray. He'd heard rumors. Certain species always got the short end of administrative efficiency. If the synthesizers didn't support your genome, you were placed on a waiting list. A list that seemed to stretch conveniently into infinity. "Let me guess," Ari muttered, crouching down. "They told you to wait until next semester." The boy's stillness was answer enough. Ari sighed and dropped to sit cross-legged across from him. He opened his satchel. Inside was the half of a rice and lentil wrap he'd been saving for later, wrapped in foil gone slightly warm from his body heat. He hesitated. Regulations were clear about sharing food across species. Cultural contamination, they called it. Liability, they meant. Still, the boy's eyes flickered toward the parcel, like moths chasing light. "Don't tell anyone," Ari whispered. He unwrapped the bundle and held it out. The boy stared, conflicted. Hunger warred with something else. Pride, fear, maybe both. His hands trembled as he reached. When his fingers brushed Ari's, the skin was startlingly cool, delicate as glass. Filaments. And he pulled the food close and, with hesitation breaking like thin ice, he took a bite. The change was immediate. His ear fins lifted fractionally. His shoulders unknotted. His face softened. He ate carefully at first, then hungrily, as though savoring every grain, every shred of lentil, every note of spice. It was like watching the dawn unfold over a frozen plain. Ari couldn't help a grin. "Guess Earth cooking isn't so bad, huh?" Boy swallowed, eyes shining. "Kai," he said at last, voice formal, precise, as though every syllable was weighed before release. "My name is Kai." "Ari," he replied. "And you don't have to eat alone anymore." For the first time, gratitude flickered across Kai's face, small but undeniable. Neither of them noticed the tiny camera lens above the reclamation chute angling down, adjusting focus. Nor did they hear the faint ping that whispered through encrypted channels, tagging the feed with a black flag priority code. Far above Beta 13, in a chamber filled with star maps and silent advisors, someone important leaned forward and said, "Found him." Ari only saw Kai finish the last bite, his ears finally unfolding fully, like sails catching wind for the first time. He thought it was just kindness. He didn't realize he'd just broken the clean, sterile rhythm of his invisible life, and set into motion something far greater than either of them could yet imagine. The next 7 days unspooled like a strange secret Ari never expected to keep. His shifts followed the same dull rhythm: scrub the hollow boards, chase dust from lecture halls, polish the nutrient dispensers, until he could see his tired face reflected back. Yet in between, hidden in the edges of Beta 13's endless corridors, he found himself searching for Kai. And every time, Kai was there, always waiting in some shadowed corner or abandoned bench, tray still empty, ears folded low, until Ari arrived, with something tucked into his SATCHEL. At first it was simple. Half of Ari's meal, or leftovers smuggled past the reclamation chute. But by the third day, food started appearing in his locker: bread still warm, little packets of fruit paste, even a carefully sealed bottle of earth milk. He didn't ask who put it there. He told himself it was some glitch in the supply manifests. An administrative hiccup that accidentally stocked a janitor's locker with food. But some part of him knew better. He didn't question it too hard. Kai's way of eating was careful at first, deliberate, as though each bite had to be earned by suppressing his pride. But as the days passed, the mask cracked. His ear fins lifted higher. His voice, once stiff and formal, softened into genuine conversation. He asked about Ari's home, about the smell of Karachi's rain on pavement, about what it felt like to ride a bicycle downhill with the wind tearing at your clothes. In return, Kai told him about the Lysari sky currents, great rivers of glowing air that wrapped their planet, carrying seeds and travelers alike. Sometimes, when he spoke, Ari swore he could hear the longing hiding beneath Kai's precise diction. But Beta 13 noticed. Drones lingered longer when Ari mopped the cafeteria. Their lenses clicked, their hums sharpened. Vice Principal Zalakan, oozing administrator, whose translucent body shifted with faint, bioluminescent disapproval, slid into Ari's path one afternoon. Apprentice Malik, it said, voice bubbling through a translator coil. Unsanctioned resource transfers have been observed. Cross-species dietary violation carries expulsion. Cease. Ari nodded quickly, kept his eyes down. Of course, Vice Principal. He kept walking. That night, he still slipped Kai a foil-wrapped sandwich. By the 5th day, whispers crept through the corridors. Some students claimed an Umbral unit Imperial soldiers in their star-black armor had been spotted near the shuttle ring. Others swore the Empire was testing a lockdown drill. Ari said nothing. Kai said less. But when they sat together, Ari noticed Kai always placed himself where he could see every exit, every reflective surface. It was the instinct of someone who had grown used to being hunted. On the 7th day, the storm came. It began with the sirens. A low, throbbing tone that shook the dorm walls and made the floor lights flicker blood red. 4 screens snapped over the gates with a crackling roar. Students were herded into the main atrium, their voices tumbling over one another in panic. Faculty lined the balconies, their silence louder than the alarms. Ari pushed through the crowd until he found Kai, smaller than most around him, standing impossibly still as chaos rippled through the room. Beyond the 4-screen, rain streaked across the orbital shield, blurring the outlines of figures in armor black and sharp against the glow of the gas giant below. The Umbral soldiers had arrived, their formation perfect, their weapons idle but ready. The gates trembled with the sound of boots. The storm outside seemed to fall silent as a voice boomed through the atrium's comms. By order of the Imperial Regency, a summons is issued. One among you has bound themselves by covenant. Step forward. Kai's ears twitched, rising halfway before he forced them back down. Ari's stomach tightened. He gripped his mop handle, suddenly aware of how flimsy it felt in his hands. Students looked around, muttering, shoving one another toward the front. Zalek jellied forward, quivering nervously. But the voice came again, sharper, unmistakably directed inward. "You there, human." The crowd parted, eyes narrowing in his direction. Ari froze, mop clutched like a spear. The soldiers at the gate didn't move, but he could feel their focus pinning him like insects on glass. Beside him, Kai straightened, his small body taut with something Ari had never seen before, not fear, but resolve. He opened his mouth, and when he spoke, his voice wasn't the timid, formal whisper Ari knew. It rang like ceremony, clear and cold. "Stand down. He is under covenant." And just like that, Ari's world shattered. The atrium fell into silence, so complete Ari could hear his own breath rasping in his ears. Hundreds of eyes bored into him, human, alien, faculty. Drones, every gaze snapping to the Lysari boy, who had just spoken as if he carried the weight of law itself. Covenant? Ari croaked, gripping his mop so tightly his knuckles blanched. He had expected punishment, interrogation, maybe expulsion. Not this. The lead umbral soldier stepped forward from the gate. The armor was midnight smooth, lenses reflecting nothing but cold fire. When the comms crackled again, the voice that emerged was different, lower, deliberate, deferential. Designation: Kai of Lyser. Your claim is acknowledged. And then, impossibly, the soldier's note. Gasps rippled through the atrium. Zalek's translucent body flickered in panicked stripes. Students stumbled backward, as if reverence itself were contagious. Even the drones faltered mid-flight, systems struggling to reconcile protocol with spectacle. Ari stared at Kai, whose amber-green eyes had gone sharp, suddenly ancient. The boy's ears no longer drooped, they flared upward, catching invisible currents, regal and steady. The quiet child Ari had fed scraps to know stood like a blade revealed from its sheath. What the hell is going on? Ari hissed under his breath. K. I did not look at him. Instead, he raised his chin and spoke with a cadence Ari had never heard before. By covenant of sustenance, witnessed and recorded, the bond is sealed. Imperial law recognizes the giver as guardian. Harm him, and you defy Lyser and the Seven Banners. The soldier at the gate pressed a fist to chest plate. So sworn, the atrium erupted, questions, shouts, accusations. A covenant? With a human janitor? Ari barely understood the words, but their effect was undeniable. Students scrambled, whispering furiously. Faculty stared with pale faces. And in the heart of it all, Ari stood frozen while Kai, impossibly calm, turned toward him at last. "You gave me food," Kai said quietly, voice now stripped of pretense. "Not as a transaction, not as an order. You offered because you saw me. That act bound us." Ari shook his head. I just didn't want you to starve." Kai's lips curved in something between sorrow and gratitude. "To you, kindness. To my people, oath." The soldiers rose as one. Their leaders. Visor tilted toward Ari, unreadable. "Guardian, you will accompany us. The Regency commands your presence." "Wait, what?" Ari's voice cracked, but his mop-hardened hands tightened around the handle anyway. His mind reeled. He was just a kid from Karachi, working night shifts to earn a scholarship. He was nobody, and yet kneeling soldiers? Guardianship? Oaths? Older than empires? Kai stepped closer, his small frame radiating an authority Ari could feel in his bones. "If you refuse, they will take you by force. But if you go, you walk beside me, not behind." Ari stared at him. The janitor in him wanted to laugh, to scream, to hide in a supply closet until this storm passed. But another part, that had chosen to break the rules for a hungry kid, recognized there was no turning back. He swallowed hard. All right, I'll go. Kai's ears flicked, a Lysari gesture of approval. Then louder, his voice carrying across the atrium like a command no one dared disobey. He walks under my shield. The gates shuddered open. Beyond, the umbral soldiers parted in formation, leaving a path that led toward the waiting shuttle, its hull bearing the golden insignia of the Imperial Regency. Ari's mop clattered to the floor, forgotten, and as he stepped forward, the boy who had once been invisible became something else entirely, an unwilling piece in a game he hadn't even known existed. The shuttle bay swallowed Ari whole. He had expected steel and shadows, the cold sterility of military transport, but the moment he crossed the threshold, he felt something else, oppressive grandeur. The interior was lined with banners woven from fibers that shimmered like captured starlight, each bearing a crest unfamiliar to him, but recognized instantly by the soldiers, who stood rigid, their armor reflecting the faint glow. Kai walked ahead, smaller than the armored figures flanking him, but somehow the center of gravity in the room. Every step he took, the soldiers adjusted their stance, as though even the air around him required reverence. Ari trailed behind, trying not to trip, his heart hammering so loudly he swore it must echo in the hull dot. The shuttle's door sealed. Shut with a hiss. Gravity shifted as the vessel detached from Beta 13. Ari pressed his hand to the wall, feeling the vibration of engines that could probably outrun planets. The void outside flickered across a viewing screen, streaks of stars bending into the blur of faster-than-light. He was going to vomit, or pass out, or both. Instead, he whispered, "What the hell just happened back there?" Kai finally turned. The soft, timid boy Ari had shared food with was gone. In his place stood someone taller than his frame should allow, someone who carried words like weapons. "The covenant of sustenance," Kai said. "It is one of the oldest oaths of my people. To feed one of Lyser when they are in need binds you to them, and binds them to you. Before the Empire consumed us, such bonds shaped clans, families, even nations." Ari blinked. "You're telling me, giving you half a sandwich just made. Me your what? Guardian?" Kai's eyes softened, if only for a heartbeat. "Not just my guardian. By law, my equal, my shield." The words sank like stones into Ari's chest. He wanted to laugh. How could a janitor from Earth, a kid who cleaned vomit off lecture hall stairs, be equal to whatever K really was? But the soldiers kneeling replayed in his mind. The silence of the faculty, the way the entire station had shifted in that instant. He forced a breath. "So who are you? Really?" Kai hesitated. His hands folded before him, almost ritualistically. "Caton Vera Lyser, direct bloodline to the Regent Council. Second heir to the 7th banner." His voice grew quieter. "To you, I was just Kai. To them, I am something they'd kill to control." Ari stared, throat dry. "You're royalty." "I am a prisoner of expectation," Kai corrected softly. The shuttle shuddered as it docked. Doors slid open to reveal a vast hall of obsidian stone and vaulted arches alive with shifting constellations. Soldiers lined the path, their formation immaculate, each movement choreographed as if rehearsed for centuries. At the far end, upon a raised dais, sat a figure draped in robes of living fabric that rippled like liquid dusk. Their eyes silver, faceted, unreadable, locked onto Ari the moment he stepped through. The soldiers struck their chests as one. "Regent." The lead soldier declared, "The heir returns, and with him, his guardian." The regent's gaze flickered past Kai and fixed on Ari, sharp as a blade. "So," the voice rang out, low and resonant, reverberating through the chamber. "The human stands where none were meant to. Tell me, child of Earth, did you know what you were binding when you offered that food? Ari's mouth went dry. I just didn't want him to go hungry. A silence followed, so long it felt like eternity had paused to listen. Then the regent leaned forward, silver eyes gleaming with something Ari could not name amusement, curiosity, or perhaps fear. Then kindness, the regent murmured, may yet undo empires. The hall erupted in murmurs. Kai's ear fins flared with something like defiance. Ari just stood there, a janitor armed with nothing but bewilderment, realizing he had stepped into a story far older and larger than he could have imagined. The court was not a place meant for humans. Ari felt it the moment he stepped into the council chamber, a cavern of carved obsidian where gravity seemed heavier, air thicker, as though even the atmosphere had been trained to bow. Kai walked at his side, the faintest tilt of his chin daring anyone to question Ari's presence, but question they did. The chamber pulsed with murmurs as the 7 banners representatives shifted on their elevated platforms, their robes alive with shifting bioluminescence that marked both lineage. And allegiance. The regent remained seated at the central dais, hands folded, silver eyes glinting. We convene, the regent intoned, voice carrying through the hall without need of amplification, to address a covenant long thought extinct. The heir of Lycer stands bound to a human janitor. Laughter burst from one platform, a scornful trill. A figure draped in crimson leaned forward, their jawline ridged with plated bone. An insult to bloodlines. To think an heir of Lycer, shackled to a menial of a backwater species, tear the covenant apart, cast the boy back to his dirt world. Shackled? Kai's voice was cold, precise. I was starving in the heart of your empire. None of you moved. None of you cared. He did. He saw me. He fed me. And by the ancient rites, that act is sovereign. The chamber rustled. Some turned away. Others glared daggers. A voice from another banner platform hissed. Convenient. A child's appetite weaponized to smuggle an alien into matters of succession. Ari stood there, sweat sliding down his back. He gripped the edge of his tunic, wishing he had his mop instead, at least that had weight, something to hold on to. Here, words were weapons sharper than any blade. He was out of his depth. The regent raised a hand, silencing the factions. What is broken cannot be easily dismissed. A covenant binds blood, not convenience. To sever, it requires death. Gasps cut through the chamber. Ari stiffened. Kai's ear fins snapped taut. Death. Not metaphor, not ceremony. Real. Ari finally found his voice, though it cracked like dry wood. Hold on. You're saying either I die, or... He gestured vaguely at Kai, at the soldiers, at the weight of the entire empire pressing down on him. Or I'm stuck in this? The regent's gaze softened, though only slightly. Not stuck. Elevated. You are guardian. His equal. His shield. His survival is yours, and yours is his. Should you fall, so falls he. Such is the covenant's law. The implications hit Ari like a gravity well. He'd bound himself to an alien prince, heir, and now carried a target as bright as any royal crest. The council's stares confirmed. It half saw him as a joke, a stain to scrub away. The other half saw him as a pawn to wield. None saw him as Ari Malik, the kid who once wanted nothing more than a scholarship and a quiet life. Kai stepped closer, voice low but firm enough that nearby factions leaned in to hear. You gave without asking. That is what they fear. They cannot control kindness. It writes its own law. Ari's throat tightened. Kai, I'm no warrior. I clean up after messes. That's it. Then clean up after this empire. Kai whispered. The regent's eyes lingered on Ari, reading him, dissecting him, perhaps even daring him. Then the silver gaze turned outward. Let it be recorded, the covenant stands. The human is guardian to the air. Until the stars themselves extinguish, their fates are one. The council exploded in outrage. Ari felt the sound batter him like storm. Surf. Some delegates shouted for his immediate removal. Others demanded his protection. He understood none of the words, but all of the intent. He was now the fulcrum of a political war he didn't even know existed. And through it all, Kai stood with ear fins proud, unflinching, as though he had always expected this storm to come. Ari realized, with a mix of fear and awe, that maybe he had. The regent's voice cut through once more, final and sharp. So begins the trial of the guardian. The words hung like a blade above Ari's head. He did not know what the trial was, or how to survive it. Only that it was coming, and that there was no going back to mops and hallways now. They took his mop away. That was the first sign Ari was in trouble. The umbral soldiers escorted him through a labyrinth of stone, halls carved with constellations that shifted when he looked too long. Torches of cold flame burned in wall sconces, though he could not tell whether they gave heat or simply mocked the illusion of it. At the end of the passage, doors heavier than starship halls swung open, revealing an arena unlike anything Ari had imagined. It was not a stadium of cheering crowds. No, it was intimate, circular, its walls alive with holographic fire and shadow. The council was seated above in elevated balconies, their robes glowing faintly, their faces masks of judgment. In the center of the stone floor lay only Ari, the sand beneath his boots humming faintly as if alive. Kai stood near the edge, flanked by soldiers who would not let him move closer. His ear fins trembled, but his posture remained unyielding. Ari caught his gaze, and in it saw a silent message. Survive. A gong reverberated, shaking the arena. A voice rang out, not the regent's, but one of the crimson-plated nobles Ari already despised. Let the guardian prove his worth. Trial of sustenance, strength, wit, and loyalty. The sand rippled. Shapes rose from beneath, forming constructs. Of stone and steel, three figures with jagged edges, their faces blank masks carved with glowing slits for eyes. They stood twice Ari's height, each armed with a weapon forged from pure light. Ari's stomach sank. He had cleaned up after broken projectors, faulty training drones, and cafeteria fights. Never this. The first construct moved with impossible speed, a blade of light cleaving toward him. Ari rolled clumsily, sand burning against his palms. He grabbed the nearest object, a discarded staff jutting from the arena floor, lightless and battered, and raised it just in time to deflect the second strike. The impact rattled his bones. He stumbled back. His breathing came too fast. He could hear the murmurs of the council above, the sound of aristocrats whispering bets on whether he would die in the first clash. Then Kai's voice rang across the arena. Not loud, but clear, like a thread of calm woven through panic. Don't fight them their way. You clean. You mend. Use that. It made no sense, and yet it did. Ari was not a soldier. He was the boy who learned to unclog water filters with nothing but water, who improvised tools from scraps, who knew how to solve problems no one else wanted to touch. He wasn't strong, but he was stubborn. The second construct lunged. Ari ducked, swung his staff low, and jammed it beneath the construct's knee joint. Instead of resisting, he twisted, pulling sand with him. The arena floor itself responded, shifting under his direction, destabilizing the giant's balance. The construct crashed into the third, both tumbling in a roar of stone. The council gasped. The first construct advanced again, blade humming. Ari's heart pounded, but his hands worked on instinct. He scooped sand, flung it into the glowing slits of its eyes. The light sputtered. It staggered blindly. Ari seized the chance, swung the staff hard, and cracked its head clean off. Silence rippled through the chamber. The first trial was over, but the voice above spoke again. Strength shone, now wit. The arena shifted. Walls dissolved. We formed into a maze of mirrored corridors. Ari's reflection fractured into dozens of versions, each one stumbling. Lost, somewhere within, he heard Kai's voice carried through hidden channels. Trust what you see in me. Always me. Ari pressed his palms to the mirrored walls, searching. Each reflection showed him terrified, sweating, small. All except one where Kai's reflection lingered beside his own, ear fins proud, gaze unwavering. Ari smashed through. That wall, and the maze collapsed like broken glass dot above. Murmurs grew louder. Disbelief, annoyance. Janitor was not supposed to endure. The regent's voice finally cut through. Loyalty remains. From the shadows, the last test emerged. Not stone, not mirror. Soldiers, real ones. Umbral armor, black and perfect. They circled Ari, blades drawn, and then they turned not on him, but on Kai. Ari's body moved before. Thought. He sprinted, staff clutched tight, throwing himself between them and the boy who had dragged him into this madness. The staff clanged uselessly against armor, but Ari didn't stop. He shoved, swung, screamed, bloodied his own knuckles on their plates. The soldiers froze. Their blades hovered a breath away from Kai's throat. Then they withdrew, stepping back into formation, silent as shadows. The regent stood, robes alive with silver flame. The trial is complete. The council erupted, some outraged, some impressed, some whispering feverishly about implications Ari could not yet grasp. But Ari didn't hear them. He only heard his own breath, ragged, and Kai's voice soft against the roar of the chamber. You chose me, every time. That is the only proof that matters. Ari collapsed to his knees, staff clattering. He didn't feel like a victor. He felt like someone who had just barely survived being chewed up and spit out. But as Kai knelt beside him, ear fins brushing his shoulder in silent solidarity, Ari realized something terrifying. He was no longer invisible. The Empire had seen him, and now it would never look away. The council chamber emptied slowly, like a tide retreating after a storm. Nobles and emissaries withdrew to their cloisters, voices buzzing with outrage and awe. Ari remained on the arena floor, bruised and trembling, staff still clutched in his hand like a lifeline. His knuckles were raw, his lungs burned, and sweat traced hot lines down his spine. Only Kai stayed close, kneeling beside him with an ease that seemed defiant in itself. The boy's amber-green eyes never wavered. Then came the regent. The soldiers parted to allow the figure draped in dust-colored robes to descend the dais. Every step echoed, deliberate, until the regent stood directly before Ari, silver eyes gleaming like fractured moons. You survived, the regent said, voice resonant. But low. Not approval, not disappointment. Just fact. That alone is remarkable. But survival is never the point. Ari forced himself upright, staff creaking under his weight. Then, what was the point? To humiliate me? To prove I'm not worthy? Congratulations message received. The regent tilted their head, studying him as though Ari were an artifact unearthed from a forgotten age. You misunderstand. The trial was never to break you. It was to reveal you. The words sank deep, though Ari didn't yet understand. Kei spoke next, voice steady but edged. Tell him, Regent. Enough circle in shadows. The regent's eyes flickered toward the boy, then back to Ari. The covenant of sustenance is older than empire. Before conquest, before banners, before dynasties, it was the law that bound beings across species, across tribes. To give freely to one in need was to weave your lives together. Such bonds created alliances stronger than treaties, armies stronger than bloodlines. It terrified rulers then. It terrifies them now. Ari's throat went dry. You mean? Oh, this. He gestured weakly at the hall, at the factions who had screamed for his death. Because I shared a meal? Not just a meal, the regent said. Their voice grew softer, but sharper, each word a blade laid on Ari's skin. You gave without transaction, without calculation. Empires run on fear, on debt, on bargains. But you gave with no expectation. That cannot be bought. That cannot be controlled. And so it must be either destroyed or revered. The weight of it pressed on Ari's chest until he could barely breathe. He wasn't meant for this. He was a kid from Earth who wanted a scholarship, not a revolution. Yet here he was, an anchor point in a galaxy of schemes, because he hadn't been able to ignore a hungry child. Kai's voice was quiet, but full of steel. You see why they wanted to break him. Why they want to break us. They fear the simplicity of kindness. The regent's gaze softened almost, and they are right to fear. History turns not on wars, but on moments like yours. You think yourself a janitor, Ari Malik, but now you are guardian to the heir of Lyser, a living covenant. Your existence is a threat to every tyrant who believes power comes only from control. Ari staggered back, shaking his head. No, I can't. I didn't ask for this. I just wanted, his voice cracked. He couldn't even finish the thought. Ke. I reached for his hand. Ari flinched at first, then let it happen. The boy's grip was cool, firm, grounding. Neither did I, Kai said softly. But we are here, and we are bound. If you fall, I fall. If I rise, you rise. Together. The regent's silver eyes lingered on the two of them, and for a fleeting instant, Ari thought he saw something almost human flicker their sorrow. Perhaps, or hope buried under centuries of rule. Guard him well, the regent said at last. For forces are already moving to unmake what you represent. And when they come, you must decide whether to stand or to run. The soldiers closed ranks, and the regent withdrew, robes trailing like starlight fading into night. Ari stood. In silence, every muscle screaming, every thought tangled. He looked at Kai, at the boy who had once been nothing more than a hungry stranger in the shadows of a cafeteria. And he realized the regent was wrong about one thing. He had already decided, because when Kai had looked at him with those tired, starving eyes, Ari hadn't run then. He wouldn't run now, even if it meant carrying the weight of an empire on his bruised and blistered hands.